Today we're going to talk about education in Great Britain as well as in South Africa. First, Michaela and I tell you about the history and the present school system in England. Afterwards, Linnea and Henrik will tell you about the South African history regarding education and apartheid and the present school system. History. In the Middle Ages, apprenticeship was common to get a practical job, but they also established schools to teach Latin grammar. That is where the present school system in England was born. At the beginning of the 19th century, the church was mainly responsible for the education system, but in the end of that century it changed because free compulsory education was established. An important fact when you look at the history of education is that in general it wasn't common for women to be educated. Their responsibility was instead to run the household. Today, the Department for Children, Schools and Families and the Department of Innovation, University Skills are responsible for education in England. School is compulsory for children from 5 to 16 years of age. School uniforms are obligatory in most schools. The local authorities are in charge of the educational policy for public and state schools. But there is also another, more expensive way of schooling, independent schooling. Those schools are called private schools or public schools. The reason why they call it public schools is because it was only possible for people who could pay the fee to go to school instead of private tutoring, which was most common at that time.
Now, I will explain the different types of schooling in Great Britain. First, there are schools provided by the government, so-called state schools. They start with primary schools, that is for children from age 5 to approximately 12. Afterwards, they attend a so-called comprehensive school, that is a secondary school till they are approximately 16. 90% of British students are educated at these comprehensive schools. These are very large schools that teach a very broad spectrum and children from a wide ability range. Now, let's talk about the non-government schools that are called independent schools because they have the freedom to operate without government regulation. Preparatory schools are the independent primary schools, where pupils are measured in their academic achievement and prepared for the following independent secondary school. Independent secondary schools can often be boarding schools, which means that the pupils study as well as live there during the term. They have higher academic standards and provide a wider range of opportunities such as sport, drama and music. These schools are especially for students with rich parents, as they are usually very expensive compared to state schools. That was the most important about British education. And as you may know, England has influenced a lot of the colonial possessions regarding the education system. Therefore, we travel to South Africa, where Henrik will tell you about that.
In 1652, when the Dutch East India Company started their colonial activity in the Cape, formal education also started in South Africa. The first formal school was established in 1658, 6 years later. It was a school for slave children who were brought to Cape. It was awfully oppressive and many escaped. In 1795, when the British occupied the Cape, they introduced the first proper system of education. In 1839 was an education department established in the Cape. Apartheid was a system of legal racial segregation enforced by the government in South Africa between 1948 and 1994. The rights of the majority black population in South Africa were curtailed and the minority ruled by whites. The Bantu Education Act of 1953 widened the gaps of education opportunities between different racial groups. The architect of the system were two Germans, Dr. Eiselden and Dr. Verwoerd, who had adopted many elements of Nazi philosophy while studying in Germany. The concept of racial purity made black education inferior to white. Verwoerd said black people should be educated for their opportunities in life, and that there was no place for them above the level of certain forms of labor. Black education was not supposed to drain government resources from white education. But in the 1960s, the number of schools increased in South Africa. But their curriculum was designed to prepare children for simple jobs. 1/10 of the money spent on white education was spent on black education. They had inferior facilities, teachers, and textbooks.
I'm going to talk about the levels of the South African education system. South Africa's national qualifications framework consists of 3 levels of education, and this is a model that shows these levels. First we have the General Education and Training Band, and this is the blue area on the model. And this consists of the reception year, also called grade R, and learners up to grade 9. It also includes an equivalent adult basic education and training qualification. When you have completed grade 9, the obligatory part of your education is completed. Then we have the further education and training band, and this is the yellow area on the model. And this consists of grades 10 to 12, and it also includes career-oriented education and training offered in other further education and training institutions. And then the last one is the higher education band, and this is the orange and pink area of the model. And this consists of a range of degrees, diplomas and certificates up to and including postdoctoral degrees. Since the South African Schools Act of 1996, education is actually obligatory for all South Africans from age 7 to age 15, and this is grade 1 to 9. The South African Schools Act of 1996 recognizes 2 categories of schools: public state-controlled schools and independent private schools. In the public schools, they have 1 teacher for every 33 students, while in the private schools they generally have 1 teacher for every 18 students. So this is kind of unfair. The National Department of Education is responsible for education across the country as a whole, while each of the 9 provinces has its own education department. The central government provides a national framework for school policy, but the administrative responsibility lies with the provinces.
Thank you for listening!